As the title indicates, I will be talking about adult children's union type and contact with mothers, but as you will see, our focus is mostly on the latter part of the title. We really want to show if empirical associations typically observed in the data indeed reflect a true causal effect. And as I say we, I want to explicitly acknowledge my co-author of the University of Cologne, Zuzana Žilinčíková, who is also participating in this webinar today. We are obviously not the first ones to look into the relationship between adult children's union status and intergenerational exchange. In fact, there is quite a substantial literature on this topic, and it often, but not always, reports a significant association between these two variables. By the way, by union type, I mean the difference between marriage and unmarried cohabitation. Research on intergenerational exchange has proliferated in recent years. There are at least two major background trends contributing to this development. First, it is the demographic change that resulted in more years of shared lives across generations. And second, it is the concurrent fragility of intragenerational bonds, for instance, growing marital instability, and so on. These two developments together lead many individuals to increasingly rely on intergenerational support, hence the attractivity of this research topic. Let me briefly summarize what we know from the literature on children's union situations and contact with parents or mothers. I want to emphasize two findings. One from this paper by Yahirun and Hamplová that was published in Demographic Research about 8 years ago. They found that cohabiting children have less frequent contact with their mothers in comparison to married children. And the second important finding, in my view, is the fact that the association differs to a significant degree across countries. It appears to be stronger in countries where cohabitation is less prevalent. This slide basically illustrates these 2 points. It is again taken from the paper that I cited a minute ago. Clearly, there are several countries where union type is strongly related to frequency of intergenerational contact. Interestingly, those countries appear to share some important societal level characteristics, such as strong emphasis on the family, strong religious values, and relatively low prevalence of unmarried cohabitations. Examples that we can see here include Italy, Greece, Spain, Ireland, and Poland, and Switzerland, which may appear to be, at the first glance, somewhat different. These observed empirical associations are often interpreted in two markedly different ways. On the one hand, some authors refer to self-selection on pre-existing traits, such as respondents' own values and perceived importance of the family. On the other hand, there are authors who use some kind of causal narratives, arguing that the fact of living in unmarried cohabitation in itself may result in change patterns of intergenerational exchange. This latter argument may require some further elaboration. it usually operates with the idea that cohabitation is an incomplete institution, to use Stephen Knox's phrase from this 1995 paper. Incomplete institutionalization in the sociological sense of the word gives cohabitations less social recognition and may result in a lower degree of integration in family networks. This lower degree of institutionalization may mean that cohabitations are invisible to larger family networks. They may be, in fact, to some degree invisible to cohabitors themselves. Recall, for instance, the famous research by Pam Smart and her colleagues on cohabitations in the United States. They have shown that cohabitors do not often make explicit decisions to move in together, but it is rather a process. And in their famous phrase, they say that cohabitors often drift into co-residence without much agency and much self-reflection. In some more extreme cases, however, lower intergenerational contact and exchange may also reflect conscious withdrawal of support on the part of parents, which may show, for instance, their disapproval of unmarried cohabitation, their desire that their children should marry. Now, let me shift from theory to methods. I need to explain how results like this are produced. A typical research design in this field involves the use of cross-sectional data, something like SHARE, the Survey of Health and Retirement in Europe, or HRS, the American Health and Retirement Study, or ELSA, the English Longitudinal Study of Aging. In these surveys, parents typically function as primary respondents, and they report, among other things, on the frequency of contact with selected children or all children, and on their children's union type. Then, to arrive at causal interpretations of the data, researchers typically use some form of covariate adjustment. They, depending on the data source and availability of covariates, child-level controls, mother-level controls, or dyad-level controls may be included on the right-hand side of some kind of a regression equation. The most frequently utilized statistical model in this field is some kind of multi-level model, typically with random effects. This analytical strategy mixes within and between family effects. This is good for the sample size because the sample can include mothers with one child, mothers with all married children, mothers with all cohabiting children. That is good. The sample is large and the estimated parameters and the methods are of high statistical efficiency. But of course, there is the issue of potential omitted variable bias. Some confounders may not be controlled at all or adequately with this setup. And this is the reason why we want to revisit this issue. This scheme here summarizes our conceptual thinking about this field and about the sources of bias. In the center of the scheme, in the right rectangle is the typical focus of empirical investigations. This is arrow A here. But there are other variables that may factor in and may influence directly or indirectly both children's union choices and frequency of intergenerational exchange. For instance, focusing on the level of children, we may want to consider the role of children's perceived importance of the family, which is likely to influence both their union choice and the frequency of contact with mothers. But our thinking about confounders goes beyond that blue rectangle, as we can see on the left-hand side of this figure. When we believe that there are important sources of confounding, what can we do? Well, one strategy is to find, define, and measure those variables and include them into the set of statistical controls. But in this particular case, this strategy may not work out very well because some confounders are simply difficult, if not impossible, to measure in a cross-sectional survey like share. So we need some other solution, perhaps a model-based solution. And this brings me to what we want to do. Our approach is different. We want to conduct within mother comparisons. That is a comparison between siblings born to the same mother. And we want to apply within mother fixed effect models that are, as we know from the literature, less susceptible to omitted variable bias. Now, after this introductory exposition of the material, I want to turn to our empirical work. So we will work with waves 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6 of the SHARE survey. It includes 21 countries, and we use all available baseline and refresh samples. The sample includes only mothers who have at least 2 adult children, and there were almost 18,000 such mothers. We use only their own biological non-co-resident children, and we have some 45,000 children in the sample. On average, it is over 2,000 per country. So on the surface, it appears as a fairly large sample. Our dependent variable is the frequency of contact that is reported by the mother. Originally, the survey used an ordinal scale with 7 values, but then we transformed this scale into the number of contacts per year. We applied this procedure because it is quite common in the literature, and we do think of our paper as a kind of replication of other people have done, of what other people have done previously. So we have a number of contacts per year, and then we take a natural log to express coefficients, estimated coefficients, as in terms of the relative change in frequency of contact. Our main explanatory variable is child's union status. We differentiate single, cohabiting, and married children. The latter part of our analysis differentiates 6 categories because we split each of those also by parenthood status. And there is a number of child level control variables that we use in some of these statistical models. This is the first look into the data without control, without any adjustment, just the average number of contacts per year by child's union status. And the most important comparison here is between cohabiting and married children. And we see that there indeed is some difference in favor of more frequent contact among married children. Now, let us turn to multivariate models. These are selected estimated parameters of two fixed effect models of frequency of contact. Model 1 controls for no covariates, no child level covariates, that is, and model 2 uses all available child level covariates. The most important row here is the contrast between cohabiting children and married children. In model 1, we see there is no effect whatsoever. In model 2, with child level controls, this effect turns to be positive. So this goes really against the literature because it indicates that the frequency of contact in cohabiting children is about 5% higher than in married children. So that's the first piece of evidence that actually goes against the institutionalization thesis. Then, as the next step, we want to explore whether there is some variation across contexts in this cohabitation effect. We first wanted to test whether there is an interaction, statistically test whether there is an interaction between country and cohabitation. And as you can see here, all statistical indices suggest that the simple model, that is a model without any interaction, should be preferred. So we, again, this indicates that there is very little variation across contexts in the size of the cohabitation effect. It is, however, possible that there is some variation that is not captured by this global interaction. So we also estimated the model separately for each country. And in this graph, we show the estimated contrast between cohabitation and marriage. There are indeed several countries where the contrast between cohabitation and marriage appears to be large and substantively significant. But by the way, this figure shows the point estimates for each country and also the 95% confidence intervals. And those two horizontal dashed lines indicate what we subjectively considered substantively significant. So there are overall 7 countries here where mothers report more frequent contact with cohabiting children than with married children. These countries include Austria, Germany, the Netherlands, France, Poland, Slovenia, and Estonia. On the other hand, there are 5 countries where more frequent contact is reported with married children. These countries are Greece, Portugal, Croatia, Switzerland, and Denmark. And there is no apparent difference in frequency of contact in the remaining 9 countries. When you look at this grouping of countries, you will probably, hopefully, arrive at the same conclusion as we did. We were able to identify no meaningful systematic pattern here. So that's, again, something that goes against the cohabitation as an incomplete institution thesis. So, partial summary number 1, we were not able to replicate with this different statistical technology findings from earlier research. We found very little cohabitation effect, and we found very little meaningful variation in this effect across countries. So we differ markedly in our conclusions so far from the literature. In addition to replicating earlier research, we also wanted to extend it to some degree. And our extension builds on the fact that there is a growing awareness in sociology that not all unmarried cohabitations are the same. Unmarried cohabitations differ according to aspirations, plans, expectations, as well as socioeconomic circumstances that led people to choose unmarried union over singlehood or over marriage. Therefore, this latter part of our analysis works with a modified version of the explanatory variable that differentiates not only the legal status of the union, but also the parenthood status. This is a very rough proxy for expectations, plans, and socioeconomic circumstances, but in the shared data, we were not able to identify some better variable. And we will be focusing on 2 contrasts, cohabitation with children versus marriages with children. That is contrast number 1. And then there's the other contrast between cohabitations without children on the one hand and marriages without children on the other hand. These are selected contrasts based on another set of fixed effect models. This time, we use the more detailed classification of unions by their legal status and parenthood. And again, we have contrasts that are taken from a model that contains no child-level controls, and then we have another set of models with all child-level controls. But the conclusion here is pretty much consistent regardless of the precise model specification and regardless of parenthood status. We see no model, no negative effect of cohabitation in all model specifications. If anything, the effect of cohabitation appears to be positive. Cohabitors seem to be between 4 and 6 percentage points more frequently in contact with their mothers than adult children who are married. So again, we cannot confirm what the literature concluded previously. Again, we wanted to show if these estimated parameters differ across country contexts. And I will present 2 graphs here, one focusing on children who themselves have children. This is this slide, and then I will present another slide that shows estimates for children without children. In this graph, we can see that there are several countries where contact is more common between mothers and their cohabiting children. And there are also a few countries where it is the opposite pattern. More specifically, in Greece, Portugal, and Croatia, cohabiting children seem to maintain less frequent contact with mothers in comparison to married children. Now, turning our attention to children without children, we again observe some degree of variation across countries. There is more frequent contact with cohabiting children in 9 countries. Those are the blue circles. And then there is a mix of 5 countries where cohabitors show less frequent contact. Those 5 countries are Greece, Switzerland, Israel, Ireland, and Portugal. So, coming to conclusions, point number 1, with our statistical model, we were not able to identify an overall causal effect of union type on frequency of contact. So empirical associations that have been reported in the literature so far appear to be spurious in our view. Conclusion number 2, we observed little systematic cross-national difference in the cohabitation effect. Depending on the precise model specification and definitions of key variables, we found only a very small and varying subset of countries where contact between mothers and their cohabiting children was less frequent. This set of countries included, under one model specification, Denmark, Greece, Switzerland, Portugal, and Croatia. Under different model specification, there were Greece, Portugal, and Croatia. And in yet another model specification, there were Greece, Switzerland, Ireland, and Portugal. There is, as you have surely noticed, some degree of overlap between these groups. Most notably, Greece and Portugal appear in all 3 groups. It may be tempting to conclude that these countries share some similarities, namely that cohabitations are relatively uncommon and that their family systems are quite strong. So one may be led to conclude that this group of countries really gives some support to the institutionalization theory. However, we want to point out that there are other countries with strong familialism where cohabitors do not appear to be systematically excluded from intergenerational interaction. For instance, Poland, Spain, and Israel would be deviant cases here. Moreover, the list of countries where cohabitation appears to exclude people from intergenerational communication also includes some cases, such as Denmark, where cohabitation is far from marginal. So our broad conclusion is that Stephen Knox's idea is not supported by our data. The idea that we could talk about cohabitation as an incomplete institution in the sociological sense of the word simply received very limited and rather inconsistent support. I want to conclude by two slides that contain a number of questions and issues. First, there are questions about the definition of the sample. The literature so far has focused mostly on women and on own biological children. If you think in broader terms, obviously someone is going to ask whether these findings would replicate for fathers and for other classes of children, like stepchildren. The second issue that still bothers us somewhat is the scaling of the dependent variable. We did what is common in the field and transformed the ordinal variable into a continuous one. But on various occasions, people pointed out that they were not quite happy with this transformation. But if you are unhappy, then what is the alternative? And if you have any ideas, we will be eager to hear your suggestions. Then, our comparative work has been mostly exploratory. Can we, and that is a crucial question, capture the key theoretical concept, that is the degree of institutionalization of unmarried cohabitation, in a meaningful, empirical way at the country level? If you have any ideas here, again, come forward. And finally, you have probably noticed when inspecting our graphs that many of the confidence intervals were quite wide. So we need to finish this talk by pointing out that we in fact need even more data to provide some more robust evidence on this topic. In other words, the price that we had to pay in order to minimize omitted variable bias was quite high. We lost a significant proportion of the sample. We couldn't include women who respondents who had only one child, and we also couldn't use respondents who only had married children or who only had cohabiting children. So the cost was quite high. And with those questions and issues, I would like to finish my talk and thank you for your attention.